Good morning and bright and early Saturday morning to you guys, basketball fans. As you know what you are watching and listening to, if you have subscribed or plan to subscribe, keeping my fingers crossed, of course, to our many platforms, the YouTube, Tate's Take, the podcast YouTube page, as well as anywhere you find your favorite podcast, that being Spotify, Red Circle, Stitcher, as well as Google Podcasts, iTunes, the whole nine, anywhere that you find your favorite podcast. So please subscribe, as I always try to pound that into everybody's head on a regular basis. Got a really awesome guest for you guys today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Atlanta Hawks, as well as where actually I met this gentleman at, and I really had the honor and the pleasure and was certainly delighted to do so as well. So just really excited about the guest on this morning, and really think that you guys will certainly enjoy some of his commentary. If you're familiar with the Atlanta Hawks, you've been enjoying this guy's commentary for what I'm thinking is somewhere right around like 24, 25 years, somewhere right up in that range. I'll make sure that I have those numbers correct here in just a second. Without further ado, let me make sure that I bring him on. As you know, you're listening to Tate's Take, the podcast. Follow along on social media, TATES TAKEHOOPS hashtag, as you know, per usual, where basketball lives. I want to bring in this gentleman here, Bob Rathbun, from the Atlanta Hawks, the play-by-play announcer for the Atlanta Hawks since I believe it was 1996, if my math is correct on that one.
You are correct, DT.
Appreciate you so much for coming on. I know that we've been trying to work on something like this for quite some time, for a while, and I'm really happy to have you on, as I'm sure that all of our guests here on today are happy as well. I want to remind the people out there, as we're getting started, that you can feel free to comment below with questions and opinions as it relates to the subject matter this morning. Just right there at the bottom of the screen, this is on the ticker, just below you. As follows. Now, Bob, you've been doing this with the Atlanta Hawks and being a part of the Atlanta Hawks for such a long time. How do you, in so many words, kind of recap the season? How have these guys I can only imagine that it's really been kind of devastating for the team that they're not going to be participating in the playoffs. But how do you kind of wrap up the season? How was this season for you? A little bit different than maybe some of the others, because it's been such a wacky year for all of us.
Yeah, it was. I don't know how to really describe it. Shock, disappointment. I think not being included in Orlando was a very tough blow, because we have such a young team. They need to play. And to think that they may go 9 months without playing a game is just outrageous to me. I really was upset with the league. I felt like if they were going to take the 16 playoff teams, that's fine. Just take the 16. But if you're going to take 22, you might as well take all 30 and let all of us enjoy the chance to play these 8 games and 3, exhibition games for a lot of reasons. Obviously, TV revenue is one of them, because half of that goes to the players. So it helps them get paid, their full pay. It helps, obviously, on the team side. It gets our inventory up on Fox to where that contract is fulfilled. But I think the nation, as you're seeing in the restart of baseball and basketball, hockey, soccer, you name it, the country needs sports desperately. And I think this decision by the NBA to leave 8 teams out was a wrong one. It's a made-for-TV event, and by leaving these 8 teams out, you've left out the number 1 market in the country with the Knicks, the number 3 market in the country with the Chicago Bulls, the number 8 market in the country in San Francisco with Golden State, and the number 10 market in the country in Atlanta. So I just don't agree with the decision, but it's too late now. They don't care what I think. I know it hurts the Hawks, because we've got to go 9 months now without playing a game, unless, the second bubble comes into existence maybe in late August and September, and we do have a chance to play some games.
I was hearing some conversations about potentially a second bubble, maybe in Chicago or something like that, and I feel like I didn't hear very much about it anymore after that at all. But you mentioned quite a few things with saying all of that, and it's kind of unbelievable now that you said it, and me thinking about the top markets that aren't going to be participating, is crazy enough as it is. And I think that, you know, a lot of people would certainly, the consensus will probably agree with me when you're saying that the Atlanta Hawks is certainly one of the most exciting teams to watch play in the NBA. Obviously, just calling it what it is, you know, the elephant in the room probably being Trae Young, one of the most inarguably one of the most electrifying players in the NBA. And I don't want to just single him out because there are some others. Speaking of, you one of the things that you mentioned in your last answer to the question was the youthfulness of this team. One of the youngest teams in the NBA. Now, I think that this past year, there was a lot of conversation, a lot of things swirling around the NBA about how exciting and how optimistic people were about the Hawks entering this season, and they didn't necessarily live up to all of the expectations. I don't think that there's anything that's secretive there. I think it's really wrong personally, and I'll let you speak on this a little bit, to go off and kind of point the finger and blame John Collins because of the 25 games and so forth. But what do you think that the reason that we saw the Hawks this year, and maybe they didn't live up to some of those expectations, what do you think some of those reasons were? And two-part question, I guess. The second part of it is, what did you see from this year that you think they can capitalize on quickly that we could see next year that we didn't see this year?
Yeah, great questions. The one thing I think all NBA fans have to understand, and Hawks fans particularly, and I think anybody who's been a Hawks fan for a long time and follows this league knows that young teams don't win. Many times last season, we put a starting lineup on the floor where the oldest guy was 22. And you look at the teams that win in this league, they are veterans. They've been through the mill. They have experience. They have playoff experience, and they know how to win. Young guys just don't. And this league will punish you if you don't know how to play. And that's the growing pains that we're going through as a franchise. Now, the second part of your question, we do have a young core. They're very exciting. They're fun to watch. I love them. I think they've got great potential. But, and there's always a but, right? But we've got to put a ball club together. I don't think people understand that you can't get through 82 games playing 6 young guys. You just can't. I don't care who it is. It could be the Hawks. It could be the Lakers. You name it. You cannot get through this with 6 or 7 guys. So look at the Hawks roster. Going forward into next year, right now as we speak, we've only got 9 players under contract for next season. And 2 of them, one of them is Brandon Goodwin, our two-way guy who, got a full contract. And then Bruno Fernando, who is still very early in his developmental phase as an NBA player. So we've got to come up in this offseason with ball players. We've got to figure out the bench. We've got to figure out what the draft pick is going to look like. Where will we be in the lottery? We won't know our lottery pick till the end of August. And the draft is not going to be until the middle of October. So we are in a very tenuous position right now as we speak. Now, Travis, Rod, Lloyd, they know this better than anybody, and they work on this day and night. But what I'm saying from a fan's perspective is we've got to put a ball club together. We're going to have to do it very quickly. And if we get back to playing in December, it's the 1st of August today. I mean, we've got a long way to go and a very short time to get there to compete in this league. Now, will these guys do better next year? Yeah, the natural maturation of Trae, Herter, Collins. We haven't even seen Capella put on a uniform yet. All the young guys, Hunter and Reddish, they will continue their upward climb. There's no question. But to win, which is your question, it's TBA right now. We've got to put this team together before we can even talk about, where we're going to be standing as a team when we start the season again in December, in my opinion.
One of the things I want to throw out there, and of course, if you want to be a part of the show, feel free. You can also do so. Lawrence Goggins II commenting on and saying that they have great young pieces to develop and need some prime veteran glue guys going forward that helps with the team's growth. 100. I don't know if that's 100 or 100. We'll just go 100 for now. In the locker room right now, Bob Rathbun, the Atlanta Hawks and Atlanta Dream play-by-play TV announcer for Fox Sports South. You can follow him on Twitter as well as on IG, on Instagram, whatever it is. Generation X is calling it these days at Bob Rathbun TV, at BOBRATHBU TV. You mentioned some things about Bob, about the growth of this team, and specifically one of the names you brought up was Cam Reddish. I know that we've been seeing quite a bit of love from all these players. It seems like as much inconsistency as we saw, probably the part of the season, what we would consider to be the middle. And then down the stretch, it was just like he put together these stretch of games where he looked really good. We started to see a lot of the potential and the players that or seeing the production and the contribution that the expectations that there were. With just seeing him and just seeing the time that you've seen these guys come in and just the growth overall that you have seen, where exactly do I'm trying to figure out exactly how I don't think there's really a question as to how these guys are some of the biggest up and coming stars in this particular game, and the youthfulness and things like that. When you start talking about how critical is their growth as youth when they're playing against some of these veteran players, how critical is that for these guys?
Yeah, well, they're still in DT. They are still in the learning and development phase. Lloyd has said that he wants to make that adjustment in their thinking for next year to where they will be a playoff contender. And you mentioned a guy like Cam Reddish. I think the young man's got star written all over him. I think he's got a chance to really be an outstanding NBA player. The rest of the guys, I mean, obviously Trey has established himself, but the rest of the guys, I think we're still in a kind of, where does all this fit in? How best does this work? Is Herter best as a starter? Is he better coming off the bench? For DeAndre Hunter, where best do we play him? Do we play him at the 3? Do we play him at the 4? He can guard multiple positions. How best? So I think we're still trying to see just how all these pieces will fit together. So you've got that side of the equation. Now you've got the winning side of the equation. You just can't get your brains beat out night after night after night. So how do we augment this group? And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. How do we retool this bench? What free agents do we go after? What trades do we make, if we make any at all? So I think these are all questions that, we've got to get some answers for these before we can really talk about how the entire team will come together. We know these young guys are going to be fine. I mean, they're going to be good players in the NBA. Sure. The question before us is not, are they going to make it? They're going to make it. They're going to be fine. But how do we best put the pieces together around them to have a winning team, one that Lloyd wants to challenge for a playoff spot next season? And we've got a long way to go to get there.
Sure. And I know you mentioned another thing, and I know we got to get out of here pretty fast because I know we're kind of up against it. But, you mentioned that the NBA draft, and now looking at these pieces, they have so many pieces, guys, that you can switch in and out of different places. If you want to play small ball, if you want to play long ball, and you mentioned some of that, with guys that play so many different positions. You can put Cam Reddish anywhere between, in some situations where there wasn't Trey last year, he played the point guard position starting out and played small forward and played shooting guard. Maybe even in some cases you had DeAndre Hunter playing the 2 through the 4, and so much, different options that you had. And looking at it, I don't know exactly what they need outside of, by position, because you have a Capella, so you have your rim protection. And, John Collins has been taking strides with that in his jump shooting. And then, you have your wings and you have your guards, and sure, you could use a backup point guard, but you can go and get that for relatively cheap with an experienced veteran in this league. So, it's almost like, where do you go with that? Me personally, I kind of feel that, this is when you're looking at, what you may be able to get in a draft that is not expected to be as good or as solid as some of the others. Maybe do you, kind of dangle that carrot over someone else's head if you have a top 3 or top 5 pick and they want someone else wants to move up and go get someone, maybe you can move back and still acquire some other pieces. Bob Rathbun here, the Atlanta Hawks and Atlanta Dream play-by-play TV announcer for Fox Sports South. And one of my last questions I want to get out to you, I definitely want to let the people know, as I always do this with my guests, where we met. So I'm not sure if you really remember this, but I do recall that you were, I believe, hosting the Atlanta Tip-Off Club. And, of course, I'm a huge college basketball guy. And so we brought all of the coaches from Kennesaw State, Georgia Tech, and UGA. And I'm not sure if they're still doing that or not, but I remember meeting you at that time, and you were just always, gracefully and very nice and kind to me and meeting other people. So I definitely, before we get off of here, want to let you know how thankful, overly grateful I am and appreciative of your hospitality and just meeting you on site. You meet so many different people sometimes. It's like, I could have did without this person. It was outstanding to be able to have the pleasure and the honor to be able to shake hands with you and meet you during that time. So I want to thank you for that. One other question I did have, and maybe not able, we got to get you back on here because the time seems to fly.
I know. I could talk hoop all day with you.
Dude, come on. Most people would tell you this guy will literally talk your ear off. I mean, standing up and ear on the ground, this guy will talk your ear off. So, but nice to know that I can actually do that with someone else. You've seen so many players come in here to Atlanta, and it's not just these two guys who are some of the most amazing dunkers in the history of the NBA, let alone of the Atlanta Hawks. But being a person who saw these two particular players, I have to be the person to know. And I don't know if you've ever been asked this, but we've seen Dominique Wilkins, for the people who can remember that. And we've seen now making his way out in Vince Carter, which I would love for you to elaborate on his career as an Atlanta Hawk and just him as a person. But those two as dunkers, if this was a dunk off in their prime years, maybe, which way would you go on that one? Because I'm just as stuck as gum on the bottom of a shoe. Which way would you go on that one? In their prime years, both wearing Atlanta Hawks jerseys and uniforms, how do you compare those two at all?
Well, I mean, you can't go wrong really with either one. I would give Neek a slight edge. Some of it is our friendship. Some of it is our, I broadcast a game where he played in high school. So we go back quite a long way in North Carolina. So I would give it, he made his reputation as a dunker. And I think over the years, DT, what has happened is that people have forgotten what a great all-around player Neek was. All anybody remembers are the dunks. Well, he didn't score 26,000 points dunking the basketball. There was the mid-range game. He did it all. Great in transition. Whereas what we saw with Vince, obviously he came onto the scene as a high flyer and a dunker and, won the contest. But that was 20 years ago. Yep. And then as the years have gone by, we have seen Vince sort of transition into the player that we sort of saw here in Atlanta. I mean, he was at the tail end, but I mean, Vince, became the all-around shooter, et cetera, that we saw toward the end of his career.
That's correct.
But Neek sort of stayed the same. His whole time in Atlanta, it was the same deal. He was the leader. He didn't really have anybody else around him to speak of in terms of, that big all-star presence that to go with him. So a very tough question. I think both are outstanding, but I would just give a little bit of an edge to the human highlight film.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I know that it's almost like you said before, you can't go wrong with either of these guys, and definitely want to looking forward to maybe getting you back on here. I know I said that was my last question. I actually have one question with you, Bob. A
Yep.
guy actually chimed in on the show who's actually a cousin of mine, believe it or not, same last name, so it shouldn't be that hard to imagine, with a really awesome book out, who's now an author as well, called Black Fatherhood. Keith Tate asking Bob, what are you offering? Asking about John Collins and saying, are you willing to part with him?
Well, me, I would offer John. I've got 250 on a Starbucks card. That's about all I got to offer John. Now the Hawks have a lot more money than I do, but I don't know. They're not going to let John walk. There's no question. He's a big part. He wants to be here. The timing of all this, I think, has changed the equation. Not that the end result is going to be favorable to John and favorable to the Hawks. The problem is we don't know what the cap's going to happen with the cap. Nobody saw a pandemic when they wrote the CBA. Revenues are going to be drastically down. Everybody's going to take a hit. Are they going to leave the cap where it is? Are they going to reduce it? Does everybody get reductions across the board? And nobody has those answers. So it's really hard to say, just what the Hawks are going to do, what any team is going to do with their own restricted free agents in the next 3 or 4 months. We just don't have any direction on that yet. Max deal for John or for any, say, guy in their fourth year might be reduced significantly. So he may be better off just to wait a year. And then try to get a better deal, a better second contract, because extending him now doesn't seem to make much sense given the uncertainty of the marketplace. So that's what I would say. I would say to Hawks fans, don't worry, don't panic, but let it play out. They know what they're doing, and both sides are well aware. Everybody in the league knows we are going through the most crazy time we've ever gone through, and it'll all work out in the end.
I'm not sure that there's anybody who would definitely disagree with that. I probably couldn't have said it better myself. Bob Rathbun, Atlanta Hawks and Atlanta Dream play-by-play TV announcer from Fox Sports South. Thank you so much for coming on.
Buddy, you got it.
Willing, and I'm really glad to have you here, and looking forward to when we can do this all over again.
It was my pleasure, and I'm very proud of you for what you've done. I mean, you have bootstrapped this thing right from the start. And it's been your passion and your energy and your positive enthusiasm that's gotten you this far and will take you a long way. So it was my pleasure to join you today.
That means more than you know, probably everything to me. Thank you so much. Bob Rathbun, everybody, make sure that you follow him along. Thank you so much. On
you got it.
Twitter as well as on IG, social media at Bob Rathbun TV, at BOBRATHBUN TV. And really grateful for having him on. Now, I definitely wanted to, I know that we couldn't necessarily get to everything, and there may have been some audio issues in there. So, of course, this thing isn't perfect, but yet we're still, ironing out wrinkles, as I like to call it all the time, and just, and I guess kind of, trying to tighten up some loose screws a little bit. So if there's anybody else, and I'm definitely going to, open the floor up to some different people as we kind of talking about NBA basketball now for the next few minutes. Had the opportunity to, thankfully, some people were chiming in and let me know not only about the audio issues, but also chiming in about some of the things that Bob were referencing as regards to the Atlanta Hawks. Lawrence Goggins chiming in, as well as Keith Tate, of course, chiming in as well. Rob Hamilton, along with Mel B, Pasty, let me throw this up there. I could probably spell it better than I can say it, but I want to make sure that I'm not butchering anyone's name. Patsy Natanagara or Natanagara, something right up in that range. I'm sorry if I butchered the last name a little bit. I tried to do the best that I possibly could, kind of like those Atlanta Hawks. But definitely want to thank you for chiming in with us as well. Julio ATL chiming in as well, saying that they should let John Collins walk, and that's kind of my issue with John Collins is that the crazy part is that John Collins came in, and when I saw him get drafted, I was there at the at the official Atlanta Hawks draft and had the opportunity to after they drafted John, and just looking at who else was all there on the board. You probably couldn't have said, you know what, I'd rather have this player, I'd rather have this player instead of John. Was he the best available player? Well, now looking at it, yeah, absolutely. But at that time, I'm not sure that I necessarily would have gone that route. I think he was the best available player at that time, but they definitely did themselves, justice and service by picking him up at that time. Where I wasn't. I told John this to his face. I said I wasn't a believer. I wasn't a believer that you were going to come into the league and do what you have done and have the first year that he had. And now this is going into his second year at this particular time that I had the opportunity to speak with him and let him know that, because I want to be completely transparent and full disclosure that I just was not a believer. And I told this John to his face, but I was wrong. And and that's just what it was. So not only did he come out of the gate his rookie year and have some really good numbers that really surprised even me, and still didn't see the floor nearly as much I think he could have because of Taurean Prince and some other guys that were there playing at his position. But even more so, he came out his second year and really even stepped it up a higher notch, something that I was not, expecting at that time either. And then came out his third year, even though, and I do completely understand and overstand the 25 games, and people are always going to point the finger at John. And I don't think it's right to just point the finger at John. I love the way that Jabari Parker stepped up in that role and in his position, which I thought was obviously something that was really good for that team. But even more so, I would have liked the idea of seeing John come back this year and see how he can raise up to another level, because I just did not see this in John Collins. Not just the way he performed his rookie year, not just the way he performed his second year, but even this past year. And so I have no other reason but to trust and believe that John Collins was going to lift his game up again. I'm interested to see how things were going to work out between him and Trae Young in pick and roll situations, or when Trae Young penetrates to the basket and throws the lob. I'm interested to see how things are going to work out with Clint Capella. I'm not really sure what that's going to look like just yet, but I know that Atlanta Hawks fans are, doing some, have some thoughts on exactly what that's going to look like as well, and why we like to be ideal of how that'll look with Trae Young penetrating to the basket and just throwing it up. You might have two guys that are going to be trying to go for the basketball at that time and put it down. But I say all that because John Collins really worked on his jump shot. That has significantly improved. His rim protection, I think, slightly improved, probably not to the level that he would have liked. And even his perimeter defense. Those are three particular areas that, after speaking with John entering the season, that he really wanted to lock in on and focus on. So when you say, letting John walk, kind of like Julio ATL did, and also saying that he's going to want more money than he is worth, they need a true number one. I like Trae, but he has to be the number two. I'm not sure that I'm willing to put someone who's averaging like 10 assists on the season in the league at the number two spot. Situational, I wouldn't disagree with that, but just long term, I'm not sure that I'd be willing to go that route. However, the reality is that when you look at John, like when you look up the definition in your mind of max contract, and you flip to that in the dictionary, okay, John Collins' name and picture just does not, it's not him that rings a bell. It does not appear in your mind. But when you look at his numbers, I know some other guys whose numbers have not looked all that great, that got max deals. They can't even compare to the numbers that John Collins has gotten. And it's just it's kind of night and day, you know. As much as I really like Draymond Green and him as a defender and so forth, and there's a lot of other things that made him some money, and he's kind of like the modern day Dennis Rodman in a sense, to an extent, as a glorified role player. But if he's offered something to max, and I'm just using Draymond Green as an example, then why is somebody like why is somebody like a John Collins not being offered something like that? Because he can give you that and more. Now it might look different, but it's not going to be exactly that. So just want to go through some of the comments, since we can kind of keep this thing going, and see what everybody else is talking about. Lawrence Goggins saying that John Collins is very efficient, a 20 and 10 guy. Once his rim protection comes around consistently, he'll be a top player in the league. To my niece, Brianna, Bree Carter, keep grinding, Uncle. You know I'm going to do my best to keep trying to do that. Always thankful when you get those family members. Hey, every time I see her name like scroll up or something, or she's calling or whatever, I'm always like, hey, I used to change your diapers. Don't ask me why that's the first thing that comes to my mind, but it's just the truth. So I appreciate her being a grown woman now and showing some love and supporting the uncle, man. That always means a lot. Before I start shedding a tear and crying here, we're gonna keep on moving. Saying that Mel B says that you don't let a double guy walk. I don't know if that's a WTF, but that's a TF. Oh, TF. Okay, I get it. Yeah, I'm not gonna say that here. Great chat, fellas, from Lawrence Goggins. Patsy, we're just going to leave it at Patsy for right now because I don't want to butcher the last name again, but apparently I said it right the first time, so we're just going to leave it at that. You said mine's right. Woo, woo, LOL from Mel B. We've also got, let's see who else we got in here. Some more basketball stuff in here. I'm sure of it. Oh, Larisha Harris, who does awesome work. One of my really good friends and the person who I was hanging out with when the NBA decided to conclude the remainder of the season up until this point and forego the remainder of it up until now. Saying, hey, Tate, awesome stuff. You're doing the stuff I'm doing. Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your contribution to the show as well, and your kind gestures as well. Yeah, we was watching it was crazy because like me, Larisha, Sky, who else? I feel like I'm forgetting somebody else, but like one or two other people. We're up in the press box. We're watching. We're in the what do you call it? We're up in the press box. And we're watching the game, and it was like out of nowhere, like the whole thing happened with. That's just a crazy part of the story about what's happening. People tested positive for coronavirus. That was when Rudy Gobert, that was the night that he tested, and the Hawks game was going on at that time. And it was just really weird energy being in the NBA arena, watching an NBA game, and consistently watching around you different NBA games being canceled around you. Nobody's really quite understanding like exactly what's going on and so forth. And they come out and say, Rudy Gobert tested positive. And I came to a game that I played, like Mavericks and Thunder or something like that. So it's weird watching everybody who's typically off the games from really watching the game. But then phones and doing different things, you see different reactions and so much going on around you. Just felt like the Twilight Zone. Just felt really weird. So that's just how the connection with Harris. Thankful to Alicia for chiming in with us as well. Mel B saying that I think Cam and Hunter are the guys to watch next season. And I can definitely say that they're going to definitely go through some more growing pains, but certainly these games that they played this year has really helped them out a lot. And I just really hate one guy I really hated Cam, because we really saw Cam down the stretch playing the best, I think certainly the best consistent basketball that we saw from him all season. And so, so many people have question marks about him from the beginning of the season all the way up until that point because of the inconsistency and some disappointments, if I'm just being honest. I know that Cam really wanted to, after talking to him multiple times in the locker room, he really wanted to get that monkey off his back. He was just kind of saying, kind of keep that same energy, remember this. You're gonna remember this. You're gonna remember me. And I'm gonna make you remember that. And he wants to be the best two-way player in the league. I hate when people say, you just despise people saying two-way player, because I feel like defense is automatically supposed to go along with offense when you're a basketball player. And I know not everybody is Rudy Gobert or somebody that's outstanding. Not everybody's going to be Pat Beverly on the perimeter, but I just feel like it's something that you are supposed to be able to do anyway. It's supposed to be a two-way. I'm not saying he's going to be this person. He'll always be the person that you know. You've heard me say this before on other podcasts, but I always felt like Rudy Gay. Tyrese Halliburton Iowa State, and I know that there are some question marks in regards to um, the injury that he's coming off of, and he didn't have the greatest year in the world. But a lot of people don't really watch Iowa State to see exactly what kind of year he had, especially from a size standpoint, his length. Not the most athletic guy in the world, but can certainly keep up with some of the most athletic players. And you don't have to beg him to play defense. And this just sounds like an Atlanta Hawks pick to an extent. And you're not if the Hawks could, and I know we talked about they wouldn't do this, but move down. But if they're gonna make a pick here, and you're looking at number 5, that might be a guy that you want to see because he is the ball handler. Where much like Julio ATL was saying that you want to get Trae Young off of the point guard position for a little while, you move him over to the 2 guard, and you got a guy who's big enough in size and a ball handler, um, with a pretty good NBA body, who maybe need to hit the weight room a little bit, but I think you could say that about anybody in this draft, probably not named Anthony Edwards. And I think that he would do well at that position and be a really good backup. Um, One thing that Bob Rathbun mentioned was a player by the name of Brandon Goodwin, who uh, is currently the backup point guard for the Hawks between him and Jeff Teague. And I never understood or overstood the purpose of Jeff Teague uh, at coming back to Atlanta, where it just didn't really serve much of a purpose for me, especially when you can keep that money and go elsewhere to get some help, or allow that financial decision, contribute that to another player at another position, maybe getting some help defensively specifically, which is something that this team definitely needs. But Brandon Goodwin being a player, one of my buddies, man, from Best Friend Park over there on Jimmy Carter. If you're familiar with the ATL, then you know what I'm talking about. So we used to play a little pickup over there, and I'm really, really happy, super excited for the opportunities that Brandon Goodwin got an opportunity at this year with the Atlanta Hawks and his contract. And so I just want to throw him a shout out because I know I've been working towards getting him here on the podcast as well for quite some time, but just definitely want to show him some love because where he's come from and being a hometown product, and then now making his way onto his hometown team. I mean, that's kind of like every kid's dream to an extent. And so I think that is very important that I show him some love there. Um, uh, Mel B also saying, we need more veterans for the Hawks who can help us defensively and offensively and bring leadership, and we will be okay. I like to think that I can agree with that. That's going to be the main thing. Um, is going to be that leadership. Lawrence Groggins saying the same for Tristan Thompson, too overpaid. I'm not sure if that's in comparison to John Collins exactly from the Atlanta Hawks, but I would imagine that that's kind of where he was going with that one. I definitely have rather have John Collins. If I'm going to choose between the two to take on a max contract or a big time contract, yeah, I'm definitely gonna go with John Collins on that one. And I see what he's saying here. Same for Tristan Thompson, talking about guys like Draymond Green and so forth, guys that are getting max contracts and are definitely overpaid. Um, Julio ATL saying it's all about the timing for those big time contracts. Audio messing up, can't hear me. Oh, Cam is special. You don't see too many rookies come in off the rip to play good defense the way that Cam Reddish has. So appreciate as it seems like we've got some audio issues here and trying to finagle those and wiggle some of those issues out. Not really sure why that is, but I do thank and appreciate everybody for staying here with me. And again, thanking everybody for chiming in. Carlos J, Julio ATL, Mel B, Lawrence Groggins. Let's give this thing. Oh, Larisha Harris, Rob Hamilton, who I probably need to be on the line with ASAP to talk about some of these audio issues. Um, let's see if I can pronounce this properly because I'm gonna try this one more time. Patsy Natangara. It is one of those two because I got the confirmation from Patsy. So thank you. Bree Carter, my niece, I appreciate you as one. Of course, Keith Tate, who always contributes to the show on a regular basis. Gonna end up doing this again. Got Rick Kamla coming up sometime next week. Also got Bria Janelle coming up next week, and got quite a few other people. But before we do that, I definitely have to make sure that we find some sort of way to get some of these audio issues worked out. So appreciate everybody for chiming in. Make sure you tell your mama, tell your grandmama, tell your aunt or your auntie, depending on what region of the United States that you come from. Tell your friends and tell your neighbors, tell your enemies, tell everybody to make sure that they go and subscribe to the Tate's Take podcast wherever you find your favorite podcast. Just type in Tate's Take, TATE apostrophe STAKE. Just hover over, go to your podcast, wherever you find your favorite pod, hover over that search box where you see that little magnifying glass, and put in Tate's Take and it'll pop up. Be sure to subscribe, share with everyone that you know. Also, the YouTube page. Yes, we have one of those too, Tate's Take. Again, TATE apostrophe STAKE. Be sure to subscribe to that as well. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, opinions, suggestions, whatever the case may be, feel free to drop me a note, DM me, follow me along on social media, on the IG, on the gram, Instagram, whatever the cool kids call it, as well as on Twitter at Tate's Take Hoops, TATES TAKEHOOPS. Per usual, hashtag where basketball lives. I'll see you guys next week.